Silver Dollar City in Branson, Missouri is regarded as one of the best theme parks in the United States, if not the world. The park features a collection of world-class attractions, as well as a great atmosphere and immersive theming throughout the park. I got the chance to ride the park's 5 main attractions, and I got a good feel for each of them. So today I'll be ranking the top 5 best coasters at Silver Dollar City. Thunderation is the park's aero mine train and is known for being one of the best aero mine trains out there. I knew that it would be better than Cedar Creek Mine Ride at Cedar Point and Adventure Express at Kings Island, which were the 2 others I've ridden, but I didn't know just how good it would be. This layout starts with a turn right out of the station, and then you're just making your way down the hill, turning one way and dropping down, and then turning the other way before you hit a double helix that gives some janky lateral force throughout, as do most of the turns in this ride. The double helix concludes in a tunnel before exiting the tunnel and heading through a twisted hill, which doesn't feel like a twisted hill at all. It really just feels like a straight airtime hill. Yes, this hill actually gives airtime. It's weak floater airtime, but it's still airtime, at least when you're sitting in the very back row. After that, you head down this large turn that heads lower in the terrain, so you pick up a ton of speed. You keep turning before heading up to the right and into the lift hill. This lift hill feels massive for a mine train, and it feels like you're heading up the lift hill for forever. When you finally crest the lift, you turn to the left and head down a banked straight section before dropping down and picking up a lot of speed before turning up and into the brakes, concluding the ride. It is a little rough, but it isn't anywhere near as rough as Adventure Express or Cedar Creek Mine Ride. Don't let the low placement on this list fool you. This is actually a really solid ride. I would give it a 6 out of 10 just because I prefer a more thrilling experience, and this ride is designed more for families, but it is by far the best of the mine trains that I've ridden. Part of one of the rarest coaster models from a major coaster manufacturer, you would think that Wildfire would get more recognition than it does. It is heavily overshadowed by Hulk at Islands of Adventure and Kumba at Busch Gardens, Tampa. Having ridden neither, I wasn't really sure what to expect with this one. The ride features B&M's classic over-the-shoulder restraints, which some people have a problem with, but I'm not one of them. These are pretty comfortable even when you are stapled. I sat in the back row for my first ride and second to back on my second ride. The layout starts with this little turn right out of the station, and when sitting in the back, you get pulled through this transition, which is surprisingly intense for a pre-lift section. The train heads up the lift hill and you get this awesome view of the Ozark Mountains to your left. It is definitely one of the best views you can get on a coaster. The train crests the lift and you turn a little bit to the left before descending down the drop. This first drop is not very steep, but the crest of the drop is pretty tight at the start, so in the back you get a pop of strong ejector airtime that very slowly fades into positive G-force due to the drawn-out shaping of the transition from negative to positive Gs. This is followed by an immersive, which is a pretty good inversion. The next inversion is a classic vertical loop, which is an element that I really love, especially in the back row. I like the visual of the rest of the train passing through the loop. Following this is a cobra roll, which gives some decent positive Gs throughout and some laterals in the transitions. You might hit your head on the restraint, so I would just recommend leaning your head forward during these sections so you don't hit your head. I do that on Raptor at Cedar Point, which has an even whippier cobra roll than this, and I never hit my head. After the cobra roll is a small overbank turn, which is not really a standout element, really just a filler piece of track to transition from one element to another. The one it transitions to is a corkscrew, giving some positive Gs before a final helix that really gives some nice sustained positive G-force, ending the ride on a high note. The middle of the ride kind of all blends together with all of the inversions and stuff, but the amazing first drop and the forceful final helix really leave a good impression. Also, I'd heard some accounts of this ride saying that it was really rough, but I found it to be very smooth so that I could really enjoy all of the inversions and positive Gs that this ride had to offer. Overall, I would give this ride an 8 out of 10. It really is perfect for what it is, but there are so many different types of coasters that I prefer over this. One of the weirdest coasters out there is this S&S Air Launch coaster that was converted from a water coaster. The track actually changes from the coaster's track to the water ride's track halfway through the ride for a drawn-out turn before changing back to finish the ride. Powder Keg features the same restraints that are found on the manufacturer's Scream and Swing flat ride model, except without a seatbelt. I've ridden Skyhawk, the Scream and Swing at Cedar Point, and I always love those restraints because they don't come down too far, and they result in a comfortable ride. Maybe it was the restraints or the ride ops pushing the restraint down too far, but I found the restraints on both the park's Scream and Swing and on Powder Keg to be far less comfortable. So if you are someone where the restraint will really affect your perspective of the ride, then you might not like this ride as much as some people. I'm not really bothered by uncomfortable restraints, and I can still appreciate the layout and forces of the ride. This ride starts with this inclined transfer track, which is something that I haven't seen on any other coaster. The train heads onto the transfer track before being lifted up and connecting with the launch track. You roll forward and get ready for the launch. This compressed air launch pins stuns riders to their seat, accelerating all the way to 53 miles an hour, but it feels much faster than that. The train rises up and heads over this large floater airtime hill that dives below the elevation of the launch track, and therefore bringing the train to a higher speed. The coaster's top speed is listed at 64 miles an hour, and I'm not exactly sure when the train hits that speed, but I assume that it's reached at the bottom of this hill or at the bottom of the next floater airtime hill that follows this. Both of these hills give some nice floater airtime over the crest. These are followed by an overbank turn, which gives some positive G's and laterals, but it's more of a filler element than a standout. This next element is a weird combination of an airtime hill and a stangle dive, where the train rises up and starts to crest the hill before banking sharply to the left and diving downwards. This leads into a tight left turn that gives some laterals and positive G's before the track changes and goes into a really drawn out left turn. This doesn't really deliver any force, but you get to enjoy the ride's speed when it's going around this turn. The banking levels out and the train heads up into a lift hill. After cresting the lift, the train banks to the left before heading down the drop, regaining most of the speed before heading up into a banked airtime hill similar to the one found earlier in this ride. This one gives a nice pop of airtime for riders in the front before heading around a tight helix and into the brakes. This layout gives you a range of forces, and you can't go wrong with that awesome launch in the beginning. Overall, I give this ride between an 8.5 and a 9 out of 10. It is such an awesome ride, but I feel like it could use a couple more standout elements. The launch is amazing, but after that, the ride all seems to blend together with good, but not great elements. Time Traveler is the first ever Mock Rides extreme spinning coaster opening in 2018. This ride featured a much more intense layout than any other spinning coaster at the time, and is definitely one of the most unique rides out there. This layout starts with a 90-degree drop right out of the station, which is one of my favorite moments on any coaster. Because of the spinning cars, if you're sitting in the back row, you'll take this drop sideways, giving you a moment of sideways ejector airtime. It's not sideways airtime like what you find on Outlaw Run, it's exactly like how it looks, taking a vertical drop while facing in the wrong direction. It's such a unique experience, so I highly recommend getting out to Silver Dollar City to try it. This is followed by a dive loop, which gives some decent hang time, followed by positive force as you exit the element. The train whips to the left before banking right and heading up into the first launch. The launch does not boost you up to speed right away, you just stop and wait for a few seconds before the train picks up speed and heads into the next element. The launch is not completely straight, because the angle of the launch track changes halfway through, giving you this weird bump as you're accelerating. The launch is followed by this large turnaround where the train seems to stall at the top of the element. In certain rows, you are facing downwards over the top of the turn, giving this weird forwards hang time. After this is the ride's 95-foot tall loop. I was expecting the cars to spin more during the loop, but I'm not too mad that they didn't. The loop is still a great element, giving awesome hang time as the train seems to stall at the top of the loop. You could say that it hurts the ride's pacing, but I think that it enhances the ride's experience. The loop is followed by a twisted airtime hill, which gives strong ejector airtime to riders in the back row. Because of the spinning cars, you could sometimes take this element forwards, backwards, or sideways. The next element is a 0G roll, where the cars spin throughout the element, giving this really disorienting experience that is just so much fun. The train turns around and goes through the small airtime hill before the second launch. This one delivers a nice moment of sustained ejector airtime before the train is boosted back up to speed. The element following the launch is similar to a dive loop, but it's not steep enough to be considered an inversion. It gives some solid hang time at the top before whipping back down and rising into the final brakes. This ride delivers some of everything: airtime, laterals, hang time, and even some nice positive G-forces in some places. Time Traveler gives a complete ride while also being a very unique experience. Overall, I would give this ride between a 9.5 and a 10 out of 10 because of how unique the experience is while also delivering in every category of forces. Outlaw Run was the first of Rocky Mountain Construction's wooden topper track coaster model, and was the first wooden coaster to invert 3 times. The ride also features a collection of unique elements that are not found on any other wooden coaster, or almost any other coaster in general. It is known as one of the best wooden coasters in the world, and so far it is the best wooden coaster that I've ridden. One thing to note about this ride is that in certain rows it is pretty rough. My first ride was in the very back row, and while I was really impressed with the forces that the coaster provided, it was really rough. But my second and third rides were in the second to back row, and the forces were just as good as in the back, but the ride was significantly smoother. It wasn't perfectly smooth, but it had just enough roughness to give this ride a unique feel and texture without being uncomfortable. The layout starts with a small dip that leads into the lift hill. The lift hill leads into a small pre-drop, turning the train to the left, before the train crests the top of the drop and heads down the 162-foot 81-degree plunge. Riders in the back half of the train that aren't in the back row will get some amazing sustained ejector airtime all the way down the drop. but riders in the far back get this weird hitch in the drop where you start going down the drop and then suddenly the airtime gets even stronger. Kind of like a toned down version of how I have heard people describe the drop on Skyrush at Hershey Park. As long as you sit near the back of the train, this drop will be amazing. At the bottom of the drop, your restraint will bump down really far and kind of crush your legs. Unless you are one of those people that holds up the restraint during the ride to avoid that, you will be stapled. I keep my hands up for the entire ride, meaning that I did get stapled on every ride, but I can still enjoy all of the forces even with the restraint being really low. Next up is this weird element dubbed the overbanked inversion. The train turns a little to the left before flipping to the right and hitting a maximum angle of 153 degrees, classifying this as an inversion. After hitting that maximum angle, the train whips back to the left and into a low-to-the-ground turn. This entire element provides some sustained floater airtime throughout as you are whipped back and forth. The turn following this provides some great positive G-forces before heading through the twisted airtime hill. This element, when sitting near the back, gives some great sustained ejector airtime while cresting the hill, but just as the airtime ends, riders are given a great dose of laterals before once again getting some forceful positive Gs. This is followed by a speed hill that delivers a sustained pop of strong ejector airtime as the train flies over the hill. After this is one of the ride's strangest elements. I'm not even really sure what to call this element. It starts out as an overbanked turn to the left, but halfway through the element it dives down through the lift structure, producing a great moment of ejector airtime as well as a great near-miss effect. Riders get yet another standout element with this massive wave turn, where riders are flipped 90 degrees to the right and the track is shaped in such a way that you get strong floater airtime while on your side. This was RMC's first try at putting a wave turn on one of their coasters, and I've heard that the one on Lightning Rod and especially the one on Twisted Cyclone are very well done, the latter supposedly producing strong sideways ejector airtime. Outlaw Run's wave turn is followed by a speed hill, which is very similar to the speed hill that follows the twisted airtime hill earlier in the ride. This speed hill leads the train into a small right turn before a very unique double barrel roll finale. What you don't notice on the ride is that this element is moving uphill. The train hauls through the first barrel roll, but because it's losing speed, it crawls through the second one, giving riders some nice hang time, especially in the back. After that, the train just turns right into the brakes. While the ride is fairly short, every single airtime moment on the ride delivers strong ejector airtime, except for the wave turn, which has airtime that feels just short of qualifying as ejector, but it still is pretty strong airtime. Every inversion on the ride delivers a different sensation, the first one being sustained floater airtime throughout the element, the first barrel roll not delivering any particular force, but just the whip of passing through this roll so fast makes the inversion great, and the second barrel roll delivers great hang time throughout the element. Overall, I would give this ride a 10 out of 10. The layout is pretty much perfect and every single element delivers amazing forces. Sure, it might be uncomfortable for some, but it doesn't really bother me. I love this ride and I look forward to riding it many times on my future visits to this park. Have you been to Silver Dollar City? Let me know in the comments your thoughts on the coasters here, and if you haven't been, what coaster are you most excited for? That will do it for this one. Make sure you're subscribed and I'll see you all next time.